I found another coaching podcast. The first time she's like, your thoughts create your feelings drive your actions produce your results. Like your results are directly correlated with your thoughts. And I was like, wait, what? You aren't your thoughts? Like I was like, you can decide what your thoughts are. I didn't know you could do that. I thought your brain just offered you shit and you just went with it.
Welcome everybody to another episode of We Are Human, the podcast that dives deep into the lives of those who work in medicine, but do not let medicine define them. Every week we bring on someone within healthcare who shares their journeys, their pitfalls, their struggles, the ways they've celebrated, the ways that they've failed, and most importantly, the ways that they stay human outside of the hospital. Because while medicine is a big part of what we do, it is not all of who we are. Welcome back to another episode of We Are Human. I am your co-host, Tyler Beauchamp, a second-year pediatric resident and children's and young adult author, and the big behemoth marathon athlete, Greek god of a co-host who is usually beside me is not here today because we are also doctors who have medical careers as well, and he got called into something to take care of that at the hospital. So we will hold down the fort without him. Tommy, if you are listening, we miss you. We hope that you are doing push-ups somewhere, wherever you are. But while he is not here, I am very excited for our guest who is here today. She is a ENT, a podcast host, a TEDx speaker, a pretty built Greek goddess herself, which, you know, if only we had Tommy on. If y'all saw her at the summit, you would know what I'm talking about. She can lift. But I'm so excited for Mel Thacker. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me. One of these days I will meet Tommy. Maybe we'll have like an arm wrestling competition or something.
You know, that would be pretty interesting because we joke here that him and I would do some kind of competition, and he actually very politely gives me advice on how to beat him, even though like I can't. That's how much above me he is. But that would be an interesting matchup because I think you might have the edge on him.
No, I would be holding on to him like a little kid, like with all my body weight, like while he would just be like looking at me like, this is
like
hilarious.
holding on to his bicep.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, Mel, thank you for coming on. How have you been?
I have been really great. I'm just coming back from a locums gig because that's kind of how my career works now. I only work 1 week a month playing doctor, and I love it. And then I went to a conference and now I'm finally back home, which is really nice.
That's amazing. And remind me where home is for you.
I am in Southborough, Massachusetts, which is right smack dab between Boston and Worcester.
Okay, so you are pretty close to Tommy's back corner too.
I'm very close. Yeah.
For those that do not know you, Mel, I'm very excited for everybody because this is also another member of the Hippocratic Collective coming on to share her story. But if you wouldn't mind just telling people a little bit about your very, very unique journey throughout healthcare and outside of the hospital.
Sure. Let me see where I want to start. So we'll start from the beginning. So I come from a little bit of an unusual background. And from what I know about Tommy, obviously I haven't met him, and one of these days we're going to connect. But what I've heard on some of his videos on social media is that he also has some poverty in his background. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And so I as well came from like very humble, meager beginnings in which I grew up on food stamps with a single mother who was mentally ill. And I was actually on my own since I was 16. Like we became homeless and I moved in with my best friend at the time. And so I always think of myself as like a feral cat. Like I never had any culture. I'm like the anti-culture. In growing up in Midwest Wisconsin and like the suburb of Milwaukee, I wasn't given any parenting. Like I was basically like birthed and they're like, okay, we'll try and like give you what you need. But just to kind of illustrate how that played out, like I was never vaccinated as a kid because I never went to a pediatrician because my mom was like a gypsy and she loved astrology and she didn't believe in allopathic medicine. So it had nothing to do with having like anti-vax views. She just was neglectful. And so I didn't get like my pertussis and DPT and all that until I was in until I was in med school. Like I fell through the cracks and I only got like partially vaccinated until I was in like medical school. And they're like, you can't be in a children's hospital and not have immunity to pertussis. But so I did not have any religion. I didn't have any expectations put upon me. Like I didn't hear the word God until I was like 10. I was like, who's that guy? And so I went through my life just kind of like deciding what I was going to make things mean. I didn't have anything I had to unlearn, which was really interesting. And I was really resourceful and really resilient. I was like this precocious, super intelligent kid who teachers were like, okay, we're just going to push her along because she's so smart. And so school was like my favorite place because I got all that external validation. And so I was like, I'm going to be a doctor at the age of 13, even though I didn't know what the hell that was or what it meant. I was like, but you help people and it means you're important and you matter. And so that's what I wanted to do, probably to matter, because I, at that point I was like, I don't know how to matter in this world. And then I went through college. College was hard, just trying to figure out where to live in between school years. So I studied abroad one semester. I lived with friends. I lived with boyfriends. And then I went to medical school, also in Wisconsin. All of this happening in Wisconsin. And then I did my residency in Baylor in Texas, and then a fellowship actually out in Boston. And that's where I met my husband. And then we moved to Florida for my first job, which was in like this perpetual employment academic model. And I realized really quickly that I hated it because I love autonomy. And I also didn't want to live in Florida. And we had a baby at the time. And I was like, I don't want to raise my kids in Florida. And I got a taste of New England. And I was like, we got to go back to New England. And I also love my in-laws. And so I wanted to be near them. So we came back to New England, and we have been here now for 10 years. And we have now 2 kids. I have a 12-year-old and a 10-year-old. And I was in private practice for 10 years, serving a community out in Massachusetts, in Worcester, which is the second biggest city in New England, second to its sister city, Boston. And I loved it. I loved that community, but I started to go through, and we can talk about that. I went through my own kind of like emotional distress and had this whole like death and rebirth where I was like in the depths of despair. And that's when I kind of had a whole like rearrangement of my life and like my own reawakening. And that expanded my ability to start a coaching business and start a podcast and do 2 TEDx talks. And now I'm like co-founding this company, and it's just kind of led me to where I am now, which is a huge diversification of my identity. And I've never been happier.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, there is a lot that I want to unpack there too.
Yeah.
And I definitely want to get back to what you're just saying. But for those that are listening and maybe who are unfamiliar with the idea of coaching, or specifically physician coaching, I think when I said that at the beginning, I might have a couple people being like, "Oh, what sport is she coaching?"
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure you get that like all the time when you're telling
Yeah.
people like you coach and are an ENT. It's like, "Oh, how do you do that outside of medicine?" Well, it's pretty connected to medicine, actually. What exactly do you do as a coach for physicians?
Yes. Good question. So I'll tell you what coaching is. It is basically a thought partnership. And so I partner with my clients who are surgeons, and together I walk them kind of through life. Like surgeons are taught how to do surgery. They are given the tools to do surgery. They aren't ever given the tools to do life. And the fact of the matter is that if you are going to develop academically and professionally, you're going to have to pause all the other development. So we develop all the way through life. It's not just like pediatrics, like, all of the stages of development. Like, what is it? 3 months, you hold your head up, blah, blah, blah. Well, we do that all the way up until we die. Like we have stages of development through adulthood. And when we focus only on external validation, being the best, comparing, competing, like graduating top of the class, and then like learning all the surgical skills and impressing our attendings, and then like going out and like puffing our chest and like being a big ego. I mean, like I'm really special because I cut people while they're asleep. And so like medicine doctors are not as special as me. And I went into AOA and I put this like piece of paper on my wall. And so like I'm better than everybody else. And whatever it is, that story that they tell themselves about their ego and what gives them status, and they dehumanize people so that they feel better. And they play that game. That is childlike. And it's like you get kind of stuck in this, you get stunted. It's like arrested development, psychological and emotional development is still in childhood. They have the frustration tolerance of an 8-year-old. They are not adults. They are children in adult suits. And so they come to me wondering why they're suffering. And they're suffering because of that, because they've never let themselves develop. And I realized that is what happened with me. And I was a child stuck in kind of an adult suit. And so I thought happiness was like making lots of money and buying a house and having a family. And so a lot of people are like, I have everything I've ever wanted. So like, why am I not happy? I don't get it. And it's the arrival fallacy. And so there's a lot of just learning about what life really is and what it's like to be a human in the world. And so that's where we start with coaching. It's a lot of teaching with that. That's kind of the teaching part. But then the coaching part has to do with partnering with people, understanding that they have the wisdom within them about their own life. Like, I am not the expert of anybody's life, and I'm not going to stand on my soapbox and say that like I have tools. I don't get like really into my own ego where I'm like, I went through all this coaching, so I know all of the things. I know all about life. You know nothing. Like, I don't know anything about anybody's life. Same thing with our patients. I know nothing about my patient's life. They're the masters of their health, just like my clients are the masters of their life. And so my job is to hold their hand and point out obstacles, like walking through Dante's dark woods. Like they're in a fog and they're like, I don't know how to get out. Like, I want to find paradise. And if you remember that book of Dante, do you guys have to read that? Okay, so they have like Mount Delectable. So we're all distracted by Mount Delectable, where it says like, climb this, you get power, status, and wealth, and then you'll be eternally happy. So that's the lie that they're all believing. But then they find themselves in Dante's dark woods and they don't know how to find their way out. And so I hold their hand and I'm just like, here's an obstacle here and here's an obstacle there. And through our coaching relationship, we start to like clear away all of the clouds and the smoke. And then they're like, okay, now I can see clearly where I need to go. And then I'm like, amazing. Let me walk with you. Let's go there. And so they actually do the leading. It's not me like telling them what to do. It's not strategy, it's mindset. And then strategy kind of like comes up.
You know, that's what's really fascinating about this is like, before even meeting you, I didn't even know that this was something that was out there for physicians. This is an entirely new concept to me, but a question that we get asked a lot on this podcast, and I certainly have gotten asked a lot over the years, especially when the writing started getting bigger, was like why do you do this on top of medicine? And I always try to flip the question to be more of like, how can we afford not to anymore? Is that we all have certain things outside of medicine, even to the most gung-ho AOA, the surgeon archetype that you're describing. Like, we all have something on our hearts outside of medicine that does make us human and gives us joy and peace that hopefully we're using to better ourselves as physicians as well. It's not to say that, you know, just because you have that on your heart doesn't mean you shouldn't do medicine. In fact, it should be one and the same. But it is ironic that to get into med school these days, we ask the world plus more of everyone. And I truly believe that if I applied to med school today with the same exact resume that I had then, that I don't think I'd get in today. Just with the way that standards have changed, the way that scores have changed, the way the expectations of what they look for prior to starting med school. And I remember going into that phase where I was asked all kinds of things about what I did outside of studying. So here's like, you know, the things you have to do that take 25 hours a day. But then on top of that 25 hours a day, what do you do that's unique that no one else does? But then the second you get to med school, for the most part, it's kind of like, okay, well, now that you've proven you've done those things, let's cut that out. Let's like focus on what you have to do. And you compound that, right? As you're saying, you compound that over 4 years of rigorous training. Then you compound that over residency. And it's so easy to see how the small micro decisions, the habits you form there, you know, if it works and you get through med school and you get to residency, you stick with the habits that worked, whether they're healthy or not. And lo and behold, 10, 15 years down the line, we wonder why people become jaded because they've lost those elements of themselves. So, and that's just speaking from a medical mindset. You throw in a surgical mindset and you multiply those years of residency by 2, 3, you know, even, and then on top of that fellowship, like it's just more and more. So I think that you're hitting it right on the head that, you know, we certainly are doing ourselves a disservice through medical training right now, as far as what we are expecting people to have when they come in, and then discouraging as we go through, and then asking the question, well, what happened in that middle time?
Yeah. And it's kind of, it's a problem, like you're saying, and it's misguided because it's wrong. I already know this. I know this because I lived it. And you can bend time. You can bend time and you can increase your capacity if you have a creative outlet. If you don't, if you're not doing something that you internally desire, not that you're doing for the carrot and the stick, that something outside of you is going to either reward you or beat you if you don't do it, that's not going to move the needle. That's not going to push you long term. You have to have some sort of internal drive. And I know that this increases capacity and you can bend time, because in 2024, that was like an example of that for me, where I am doing my full-time job. I'm a partner in private practice. I'm seeing patients, and I pitch and deliver one TEDx talk. I create a podcast. I develop a social media following of like 10,000+ followers. As of this recording, I have like 34K followers now. I create a business. I'm taking a coaching certification course. And then I pitch another TEDx talk, which I then deliver February of 2025. And so like, how could I do all of that? How can I be a doctor and operate on patients and do my day job and get to the gym 6 days of the week and make dinner for my family and be present for my family? Like you say there's not enough hours in the day. The only reason why I could do that is because I cut out all of the drama and the bullshit. And the only way to cut all of that out is to have desire. You're going to burn out if you don't have desire behind the action that you're doing. And so every action I was taking, I was desiring to do it. If my brain started to kind of give me drama, I decided not to indulge in it. So it was like, instead of thinking about it and having drama about it, it was like, no, after I go to clinic, I'm going to go to the gym and I'm going to be there for an hour, and then I'm going to get home by this time. And I don't have any thoughts in between. There's no drama. And I'm driving to work. And while I'm driving to work, I'm doing my coaching course, or I'm recording into my voice memo what is going to be my TEDx talk, or I'm practicing my TEDx talk in my car. Like, I literally built a business in my car, commuting to and from work. That. And I'm doing videos in between patients. Like I go see a patient and then I do a video for social media, and I take one take, okay? Because I'm not going to sit there and retake it and obsess over it. So it's like, you have to be willing to fail and do some B-, B+ work in order to get yourself started, and not let perfectionism paralysis prevent you. And if you do that and there's no drama, you create more time. Like, you literally bend time.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Like, one, with perfection being the enemy of good enough, absolutely. But I've like tried calling this sort of term, this counterintuitive secret of passion in medicine, is that like, we think that if we put time into these things, it's going to be drawing away, not adding to the other things. I know personally, when I was writing my first book in med school, my grades were never higher than when I was doing that project, or this music project I was doing. And when I cut those away, I felt my grades slipping. And it's like, well, I'm studying more without that. Why am I doing worse? And one, it's because I wasn't doing it efficiently. It's like, well, if I have now 20 hours a day to study, before I had 12, because I was spending some of the other time working out or some of the other time writing, but I take those out. Well, now I have more time to study. Obviously I'll do better, but no, I'm just not doing it efficiently. And I'm draining myself out, and I'm not pouring back into myself to keep me going for the next day. So you're exactly right that it's the time manipulation of engaging in your passion. It sounds counterintuitive, but it's because it kind of is. Like, it's real.
And it fills you up. And we talked about this when I interviewed you, but Jill Bolte Taylor's book, Whole Brain Living, and she's a speaker and an author and a neuroscientist who had a stroke. And so her entire left brain went offline, and we're all very left-brained in medicine and in surgery, in the profession, which is where our anxiety lives. We think we have an amygdala, and it's just one single amygdala. It's actually sided. You have a left and a right. And if you stroke out your left amygdala, you will not feel anxiety. And so that's what happened to her. And she was like in perpetual bliss when she was in like the immediate aftermath of her stroke. Eventually, like, she was able to recover from it and got all of her function back, but she also couldn't talk because Wernicke's and Burka's region were also affected. And so like, our language is in our left brain, our critical thinking is in our left brain. And so in this book, she talks about the 4 characters. You have character 1 and 2, which are living on the left side. 1 is your thinking, 2 is your feeling brain. That's your anxious part. Okay. And so that's what most people swim around, is they're like, I live in character 1. Character 1 is black and white thinking. It thinks it knows all of the answers. Okay. It thinks it's all about certainty. It's very righteous. It's very judgmental. It cares more about me, not we. It's like, what is in it for me? And then your emotional left brain is like very anxious. But then you have characters 3 and 4, which live on the right. And like 3 believes in like the collective and believes in don't know mind. It's like, I actually don't know a damn thing. Like, all I know, and I say this to only thing that any human has ever said that is actually true is I don't know. Okay. Because we don't actually know anything. Okay. It's just like if you talk to somebody who was in medicine 100 years ago and they're like, oh yeah, there's humors. And, if a patient comes in with like pneumonia, you throw leeches on them and like beat them with these herbs and then you bloodlet them. And they would say that with complete conviction. Okay. From their character one. But
yeah, when I proposed that on rounds yesterday, I got all these weird looks. So, I mean,
yeah, no. And it's like, all we know, like right now, 100 years from now, people could be like, what were they doing? They were cutting out cancers with like a bovie. Like, what the hell was happening? Like, they were like naming people. They will look at us and judge us from their character one. And so we don't actually know anything. We just have the information that we have collected thus far, the evidence we have collected thus far, and that could all change with one landmark study, right? And so it's always evolving and we only know so much. And then character 4 is like where your creativity lives. And so that's why the best antidote for an anxiety spiral is a creativity spiral. And so if you're unbalanced, you're living in characters 1 and 2, and you keep spinning around and you never activate your characters 3 and 4, you're going to suffer. So like, that's what creativity does. And whatever your creative outlet, even just like creativity is basically solving a problem that that there is no solution for. So you can actually do it at work. Like anytime you see somebody and it's like you're playing Dr. House, you're flexing your creative muscle. Anytime you have a surgical problem that somebody comes to you with and you're like, oh, I think I can like use this and I can like, fashion this procedure that's a little bit different than the way I learned it, but I think it's exactly tailored to the patient. Like you're flexing your creative muscle.
So before you decided to take on this new path within coaching, what kind of character mindset were you in between 1 through 4? Like what was going on in your brain?
I was at the arrival fallacy. So I was totally in 1 and 2. Yeah. Where I was just like, oh, as soon as I finish, like I will be happy. As soon as I finish residency and fellowship, like I will be happy. And then I meet the guy of my dreams. I have 2 beautiful kids. I have a great house. I live in a great town. We go on great vacations. Everything's on paper looking amazing. I have this wonderful practice where I have employees that have been there for 30 plus years. I'm serving a community. My practice is exactly what I want it to be. I have all this autonomy, but I am internally suffering. So it's like very weird, that cognitive dissonance between having everything you want and then not knowing why life feels so horrible. Like it doesn't feel the way you expected it to feel. And so for me, that like manifested as panic attacks. And I just became terrified of everything. And like I had this 3-month bout of insomnia where I just did not sleep more than an hour or 2. And it was absolutely awful. And I was just scared of everything. And I think that was like my subconscious, like my human animal just saying like, you can't just keep ignoring this and suppressing this. Like you have to do something about it. Cause my strategy was just to like shove everything down and try and pretend that everything was fine. And so that stopped working.
So what changed then?
Well, I think what happened, what like set it all off was the pandemic, because then when I'm in private practice and I'm mainly doing adult nose and sinus, which is elective. And so my livelihood was threatened and I'm the sole breadwinner of my family. So it was like all of the work was taken away. Not only that, like my livelihood was threatened, all of the work was taken away. So I had nothing to do, right? Like I was like, what do I do now? I'm no longer useful. Without being a surgeon and like operating on people, I am unworthy. I'm like a worthless piece of shit was like what I realized is what like I believe, which is crazy. And so that was really painful. And then I had to figure out like, why is that? And it's because I attached my sense of self, my self-worth to my job, to my profession. And so I had to decouple those and kind of like take those apart and then start to really learn to love myself unconditionally and heal that like younger version of myself and evolve internally. And so that's very painful. It's like a death and a rebirth, but it's fascinating because then when I came out on the other side and I like found unconditional love for myself and I went through a lot of like coaching and healing and psychiatry and all of the things. And I processed a ton of trauma, which is really interesting because when you talk about trauma that we store, it's very healable if you just share it with a compassionate witness. So I had to share a lot of trauma stories that I had just shoved down and not looked at. And so I shared them and it's like all of those parts were starting to feel healed. And then I got so much better and I started sleeping. And as soon as I got better, fascinatingly, my kids got better, which is like so cool. Yeah. Like when like the maternal unit, like the matriarch is well and well resourced, like the whole family unit is better. And then I was like, I took all of my degrees off my wall and I put them in a box. Now they're in a box in my closet, like my AOA, all of my degrees. Cause I'm like, that doesn't matter to me anymore. So I completely decoupled it to the point where I was like, I actually don't need this and I need to evolve beyond this. And so that's when I started to get into coaching on my own and, got coaching certification. I'll be a master coach at the end of this year. And I was like, I need to bring this to people who are suffering, because if I'm going through this, then other people are going through this. Like, I'm not a special snowflake. And if this works, then I have to like share it. And that's when I shared my story on my podcast. And like my very first episode is imposter syndrome, which was a huge problem that I suffered with. And then anxiety in the OR. And then I just talked about everything, about mistakes, about complications, about all of the taboo subjects that everybody keeps secret. I was like, I just need to just put it all out there so that if somebody hears it and they're like, oh my God, like I'm not the only one, then that will be really healing for them. And so now I have this community of surgeons and we all get together and we talk about all of the things that nobody talks about in a safe space.
It's amazing how even like the smallest elements of vulnerability can have the largest impacts. And I think what we really don't think about enough, and I'm so glad that you shared what with your family and your children's experiences too, is that the indirect, the intangible effects that just our being has on others. You know when you're in a workroom with someone who is just on fire to be there, whether they are directly helping you or not, like you feel more prepared, you feel more excited to take on, you feel more ready to take on challenges, and versus those that if you're around someone who feels drained or maybe is not maybe being the most respectful of everything, or they're just worn down themselves to no fault of their own, the smaller things just feel harder to get through the day. And that's just at work. That's not a family unit. So it's amazing how much our energy and our essence, the effect that it has on those around us that are relying on us. So I think it's wonderful that you were able to recognize that in yourself and make that change. And clearly the world's needed it more too. What was it through sharing these stories and starting that podcasting that you realized or found out your like affinity for coaching, or was it along the way someone's like, hey, you should do this for others besides just yourself because you're doing a pretty damn good job at it?
Well, I worked with a coach who I found through a mutual friend, and she was more of a grief coach. I love her. She's amazing. And her program was exactly right for me. But there's a lot of like elements that I was like, yeah, I'm not really into that. Like a little too woo for me, which is like, whatever, wherever you are in the woo scale, good for you. But like, I was like, that's a little too woo. But then I found another coaching podcast and another school of thought called the Life Coach School by Brooke Castillo. And I listened to her podcast episode 0 to like 200 or 300. I listened to them all the way through twice because they're just so good. And like the first time she's like, your thoughts create your feelings drive your actions produce your results. Like your results are directly correlated with your thoughts. And I was like, wait, what? I was like, aren't your thoughts? Like, I was like, you can decide what your thoughts are. Like your thoughts aren't real. Like I was literally just living my life. Like my brain would offer me something and I would be like, okay, that's like the truth of the universe. Instead of like distancing and saying like, hold on a second. Let me look at this. Let me look at this. Let me hold it and see what kind of emotion it would create. How would I show up? How would I act? And what kind of result would that create? Now let me reverse engineer that and decide what kind of result do I want? And so like I told you in 2024, I was like, what result do I want? TEDx talk. Okay. What do I have to feel? Motivated, inspired. All right. What do I have to think to do that? And I would just I would do that work every single day, like creating beliefs and thoughts. I didn't know you could do that. I thought your brain just offered you shit and you just went with it.
Yeah.
That's coaching. Yeah. And we have like 8,000 to 9,000 or something thoughts, 6,000 to 7,000 thoughts a day. And when we think of thought over and over again, it becomes a belief. And a lot of our beliefs are limiting. So imposterism or imposter syndrome is a limiting belief. It's just something of the flavor of I don't belong or I'm not good enough. And it comes from our subconscious just interpreting signals that culture sends us, and we decide that we don't belong. So for example, I have a lot of orthopedic clients, a lot of women, and they have a huge problem with imposter syndrome because they have to use these power tools that are too big for their hands, or they never have size 5.5 or 6 gloves stocked. These are signals to them that they don't belong there. Where they're like, all we have is 7 and 8. So it's like, this is a man's job. We have these huge power tools that fit a man's hands. And so when you're in that, you have these like micro messages all day, your brain is going to interpret that as I don't belong. And so now you're like, what the hell am I doing here? And so then your brain will offer you some version of that. And if you're not aware of it, if you're living unconsciously, which is what most people are, and what I was just living unconsciously, then once you become conscious and you understand it, that's when you can change it. You can start to shift it. And that takes work. It's hard. It's not easy. You can't just be like, I belong now. Like, I'm just going to decide that I belong. That it's not that simple.
I think I'm looking for a pen right now because you said something that I want to add to my quote board of that the number of thoughts that we have a day, but the thought that we keep on repeating becomes a belief is so true. I've never heard it articulated that way. And it brings me back to like very key moments in my life or very key decisions that were based upon a truth that I had held for so long that it wasn't true. It was just the way that my mindset had been. And I mean, I'm not, we're not sponsored by any specific therapy service, but I'm just to say that therapy is awesome, and everyone out there to some extent of therapy coaching, try it out. It's
Agreed.
the best. It's the best. I think everyone in this world could use a little bit of it. But it does come down to that as a single pearl, is that the beliefs that we hold that are compounded thoughts that we've had for years, and whether those thoughts are put into us ourselves or placed upon us by others, it is how do we recognize the beliefs that we can break, especially the negative ones. So okay, I want to try something, and if this is, feel free to say no, because if this is like sharing your secrets to the world, I don't want to do that. But like, I'm just curious.
No secrets.
Okay, I'm just curious. So if I am your client, I'm coming in for the first time talking with you. Not that we need to do a full coaching session right now, but like walk me through kind of what a first conversation with you as far as establishing coaching dynamics, or like what kind of things are you looking for out of a first session, especially for those listening that are interested in trying something like this out.
Yeah, the first thing we do is go through something called the wheel, where we go through all of their relationships and we rate them from 0 to 10, 10 being ideal, 0 being not good. And then other aspects of their life, like their spiritual practice, their mental health, their physical health, their home life, their relationship with their job, their goals, all of these different aspects of life, how they feel about money, all of these things that we don't often think about. What are my beliefs about this? And we kind of bring it up and like look at it. And that often leads us down many different rabbit holes. But then after that, once I take an assessment and I get to know them, I get to know kind of like their family, their history, their past, their current situation, what would be ideal for them, where they want to go. Then each day they bring something new, or each coaching session, and we work through it. And how you do one thing is how you do everything. So if you shift yourself in one way, you can go out and implement that in other ways of your life. And then kind of like turning a ship like a little bit every single degree, you end up somewhere completely different months and years down the line. And so after 6 months, they're somebody completely different. And so like most of my clients tell me, like if they come to me in varying degrees, either dissatisfied or suffering, but nothing outside of them changes, and their whole experience, their lived experience changes. So like, for example, I have a client who came to me like frankly suffering. And she was fresh out of training, and just like, she's like, this is unsustainable. I feel like I'm dodging bullets. Like I can't keep doing this. And so we worked together and we got to a place where she's not suffering. And she told me back then, like, if I can be at a place where I'm not suffering, like my life will be so much better. So then we get her to a place where she's not suffering through all of our coaching. And she's like, this isn't enough though. Now I need to go to the next level. So it's like, it's never going to be enough. So it's like the first phase is like getting you from dissatisfied or suffering to like empowered. All right. And then once you're there, that's when it's going from empowered to impact. Okay. So you're going to want to have an impact. That is what drives humans. And so whatever that means for you, however you can have an impact on the world. So those are the kind of like the two phases. The foundational is to get to a place of empowerment. And then like the next level is to get to a place of having an impact. Hopefully that answers a question.
Absolutely. And for everybody listening, I had maybe like a 5-minute crash course in this at a bar in Nashville with you and Joan about answering my email, because I was just getting this email that like, it was freaking me out that like, why am I getting this many emails about the same very mundane or very like minute problem, but I was getting repeated emails about it on a Saturday, and I'm like trying to figure out how to respond to it. And something I just like really hadn't considered was that like, no, technically, I mean, not by technically, this is not the time that I would need to be responding to this. If it's truly a problem that needs to be responded to, it wouldn't be coming through this medium. And I think it was the first time that I actually like put away my phone email for something like that on a day off. And if I honestly felt like my shoulders get a little bit loose, but I had not, it's the thought that, you know, as a resident, or I mean, especially in my line of work from the writing aspect, is like when you get an email for an opportunity, like you take it. And when you get an email, you respond to it because, you know, you're doing what you can to make a name for yourself. But if you think that thought for so long, and it becomes a belief that now when I get this email, I have to respond to it right now. That's a belief that I have. I'm like, well, actually, it's not really, that maybe shouldn't be a belief, because I need to also protect the time to keep me whole and energized for when I am on the clock. That was 5 minutes with Mel, everybody. That was 5 minutes. So I can only imagine what like having her in your corner for longer than that can amount to.
Yeah, and it's like no wonder we're all overachieving people pleasers. It's like Pavlov's dog. Like we should not be conditioned to get an email and go like, oh God, I'm gonna have now. First of all, I'm having trauma response because I have an email, right? We respond with trauma response, and then it's like I have to respond to this now, and it's like no wonder. Like for example, I give my cell phone out to patients, and I just gave one out, and she used it inappropriately, which most patients don't. And I was like, at first I had trauma response. I was like, I have to people please this person and let me answer her question. And then I was like, no, because I have these tools, you know, it's like it never goes away. You're still going to have trauma response. When your boss emails you, you're going to feel like you're going into the principal's office. When your pager goes off, you're going to have like fight or flight. But, you know, when a patient like demands something from you, you'd be like, oh, I have to please them. Otherwise they're not going to like me, or they're going to say something horrible or whatever. So I immediately had that. And I was like, hold on a second. You know, I had to take that version of myself and be like, you're adorable. I know that's what you do. But you're not the one who drives this car. And so I was like, listen, I answered her question and I was like, but I said something along the lines of like, this number is not meant for administrative questions. And so please do not use this for that. I'm happy to answer your medical questions, but do not ask me any administrative questions on my cell phone. And she was like, oh my God, I am so sorry. But like setting that boundary, an older version of me would never have done that. But I did it without any thoughts. I was like, I'm going to set this boundary and I have 0 F's to give. And that's what happens when you develop with a relationship with yourself. And like, that's the first thing is you have been excluded from the equation. To become a doctor, we don't need you. You, the individual. We don't need Tyler. We don't care what Tyler thinks because we are going to standardize you. Everybody comes in different and they go through the machine and they go out the same. That's how we standardize. So what standardized procedures, standardized guidelines. Then we can just like, you know, everybody's a cog in the production machine. All right. We don't need any individuals having any opinions about anything. And so we have excluded ourselves because culture has told us to. They're like, ignore your body. I don't care if you have to pee. I don't care if you're hungry. What doesn't matter what you need, the human, you don't matter. We need you to like do this work and do this work well and learn this material just like everyone does. It's kind of militaristic in a way. And what I'm saying is that actually your relationship with yourself is the number one relationship. So you have to learn how to have your own back. You have to learn how to recognize that you're a human. You have a human animal. You've been gifted this human. You only get one. Okay. And it needs to eat, sleep, rest, and play. And it's not special. And just like a little pet, like you have to take care of it. It needs to get 8 hours of sleep. It needs time to do something creative. It needs to go outside and get some sunshine. It needs to play and laugh with like friends. It needs to connect. It's a social creature. It's like a social primate. It needs to like have its tribe and connect with people that matter to it. So like if you can even think of like your body as like a he or a she and be like, what am I doing for her? Like, what does she need? Or like, what does he need? Because in medicine and in surgery, they're never going to say that. They're not going to be like, Tyler, what does your body need today? You're going to be like, we don't fucking care. And I swear. Right? Yeah. Okay. So like, that's like the number one thing that's flipping everything on its head. They're like, wait, like me, the human, is important here. And I'm like, yeah, you're the most important. You're with you the rest of your life.
Yeah.
So have your own goddamn back. Like now you have to learn how to do that. That is like, and again, like me learning to love myself unconditionally and modeling that for my children, that's the biggest gift I can give to them. So now my kids are like, mom makes time to work out. She prioritizes that. Dad, he goes and plays golf, and mom makes it so that he can do that because he loves that and that fills him up. And they take care of their own emotional needs, and together they just get together and have a great time. And they love each other, and they dance in the kitchen, and we love making dinner. And like, they see happy parents who take care of their own emotional needs and who care about themselves. And so they are going to be okay with it. They will not self-sacrifice because they're like, that wasn't modeled for me. I do not self-sacrifice. I matter, and I'm going to get a workout in. Like I used to hide my workouts in residency. Like how stupid is that? Like I would like go sneak away and run so that nobody knew.
You were taking a break.
Yeah. How dare you go run?
Well, it's interesting that you talk about your experiences in the household, sort of, breaking that cycle. And, we always want to, I think anyone can say that to some extent, even if you have the best parents in the world, there's things that you wish that, they're learning it for the first time themselves too. But especially when you have unpleasant or unfortunate upbringing experiences, like you want to do better for those that you leave behind. And it does come down to that question of, did I break the cycle in these areas? Did I keep propagating an issue that was brought onto me? And for one, it certainly sounds like you're doing a bang up job as a mom, which is wonderful.
I hope so. I check with my kids. I'm like, how am I doing? Like I try to get like
because feedback Friday with your kids. Yeah.
And they tell me, they're like, you're the best. I'm like, okay, good.
The evals are coming out soon. Yeah.
Yes. I need to get evaluated.
But I mean, in a similar vein, that's kind of what I'm hoping that we can be doing with medicine as well, is breaking those cycles that have been laid upon us. Like, I did not have particularly the most positive experiences in training coming up into residency. And I think a lot of the problems that were for me wouldn't even be a problem going through now, because a lot of the sources of those problems are gone. But it doesn't, take away what my experiences were. And at the end of fourth year of med school, I did this lecture circuit all over the country and talked to med schools and colleges all over the country. And it was really interesting to see the experiences as far as like where on the spectrum mine were. And, unfortunately, I did see some schools that were at least not as supportive as mine, but far more that were. But it does come down to, when you bleed into residency, is like what habits, what ideologies were placed upon you that early training, and that does stick with you. So what can we do? Where do we pick the point in time to break that mold and to break those kind of logical fallacies that, you do need to cut this out, or you do need to, that's something you can worry about and bring back into your life in 10, 20 years. But like this part of your life is only for this. Except that mindset, once you make that idea that you're thinking about 7,000 times a day into a belief, like you don't just change that belief in 4 years.
Yeah. And everybody gets to decide like what they want to do with their life at that moment. It's like a lot of people who get into medicine are living the dream of a younger version of them. Like I was living the dream of my 13-year-old self. Like I'm no longer 13. And if you decide to get into medicine when you're 18 and now you're a 35-year-old person, like you have different desires. You've completely changed. Like we change all of our cells every 7 years, except for our stem cells. We're literally different humans every 7 years. Our bones are completely different. We're just different people. And so it's like, you have to take that time to look internally and say like, okay, what do I value? What do I desire? What do I yearn for? I think is the number one question. Like, what am I yearning for? Yeah. 13-year-old me yearned to be a doctor. Then after I'm a surgeon for a while. Like I don't yearn to be a surgeon anymore. Now I yearn to be a coach. And so I'm going to do that. Now I yearn to be a podcaster. Now I yearn to like have my message heard on like a TEDx stage. Like these are things I yearn for. I yearn to have my voice heard. And And so I'm going to do that. And like whatever anybody desires or yearns for, they can make it happen. You just have to go and take action.
8 years ago, so a little over your 7 years, 8 years ago for me, I almost dropped out of college, and I certainly was not even thinking about medicine. I actually had the most negative outlook on medicine possible from my experience as being a patient for so long. So yeah, a lot can a lot can
Mhm.
change in 8 years, 7
Yeah.
years, everybody. We are not the same people that we were. And if we are the same person, maybe it's time that we do make a little change. I kind of say this from a writing aspect, because I did this rewrite of my first book, and I'm going through my next books, and we're doing editing changes. And um, as I was doing the rewrite of the first and going back through it, there were so many moments looking through that were like I'm like cringing at, and I'm like, oh, I can clean this up. And when I go around and like teach about writing and I show people like my original writings from when I'm in middle school, but I take my name out and they're like, oh God, this is awful. It's like, yeah, it's awful. And this is mine. Um, like that's the goal, right? The goal is you should be to an extent embarrassed of what you were 5 years ago. I mean, the worst thing would be looking back 5 years ago and be like, oh, I was so much better than I was. I'm so much more proud of the person, the father, the mother, the physician I was 5 years ago as compared today.
Yeah, no, I mean like that is evolving and growing and then like iterating and being willing to put yourself out there, like putting work that you create that you're like taking your heart out and putting it on paper, doing whatever it is and showing it to the world. I mean that is the definition of vulnerability and not being afraid for people to criticize you, like saying like that's fine. You can criticize me. Like that's like getting out of fear of failure. But most people we're so taught and so cultured to be terrified of failure, especially in surgery, because like failing in surgery, you hurt people. Like if you fail in medicine, you make a wrong diagnosis, you could hurt people. But like the paradox is that once you're willing to fail and you're like, I'm okay with failure, I'm okay with being a human and making a mistake, I'm totally okay with all of that. I'm okay with being wrong and making a wrong diagnosis. Like my intention is to connect with patients and to serve them, to show up in service. So like when patients are like, oh, can you promise like everything's going to go great? I'm like, absolutely not. But like, I can promise you're going to be like the star of the show. Like I'm going to show up there for you. I've done this thousands of times. And so I feel very comfortable doing it. And I'm going to do everything I can to get you the result that you would like. And so like, I have 5 of these cases scheduled, like you're number 3. And this is kind of routine for me, but I know it's not routine for you. And so I will show up in service to you. Like that's all I can promise you. That's my intention. And it's like, once you get there and you release the reins on perfection and you're just showing up with that intention, then you have less failure, less mistake, less failure, less complication, less. It's like, it's weird. You like become much more efficient and much better at your job. I don't know why it works out that way, but it does.
It really does. I So like again, I only originally published because my roommates at the time were like, if you don't do this, we're gonna beat the crap out of you. Like it was really like I never wanted the world to see any of this because I was one terrified what they would think, but also it was my escapism, and it felt like if I did share it, then I would lose that element of it. Um, and then so when it did go out and people are responding to it both positively and negatively, I mean, I remember just being like this perpetual state of anxiety, whether it was positive or
Mm-hmm.
negative. I think partially because with the creative aspect that it's so much of it, it's hard to extract as those comments being about yourself as a human and
Yes.
the piece itself because it's all coming from you. So if something is bad, then you are therefore bad. But along the way, I don't know if it was like a combination of getting the feedback through that, but also being in med school and getting like the constant feedback that you get in medicine. But something to what you had said eventually just changed where maybe I'm a masochist, but I started like leaning more into the being more curious about what people didn't like because it got easier to kind of sift through what I just disagreed with and then what I could learn from. And to this day, when I send out like beta reader things or when I'm, hearing about people's thoughts on whether it's this book or the future books, I don't know. It kind of changed to where I have this great appreciation for when the purpose of the writing does hit the right audience and does get the right message across. But I'm like more fascinated by the responses where it is sort of negative or critiquing, because it's like, oh, okay, so this is where I didn't connect and I want to connect on the next time. And I often say that the only time you can really ever fail from the creative avenue is to create something that produces indifference. If you really go about and make something and it makes someone feel no type of way, you really, that's the only time you can ever fail. But if for everyone out there who is putting anything creatively and you are getting hosed by people just like tearing it apart, do not lose faith in what drives you in that element, the passion behind it. That take everything with a grain of salt for sure, because if you put anything out there, someone's going to hate it. But if there's enough where you're saying, I could be learning from this element that people seem to say this isn't connecting with them in that way, let me try again next time. But I promise you, those kind of responses are far better than putting something out in the world and no one having any opinion on it whatsoever.
Yeah, that's extracting failure gold. Like if you just create, that's why we don't ever grow until we like have failure. So if you're doing your job, if you're a pediatrician and you're just like killing every diagnosis, you're just like, yep, nailing it. Every kid is doing amazing. You're never missing anything. You're just like living your best life and like you're writing stuff and everybody's receiving it and you're getting all of these great reviews. Like you're never going to learn a thing about yourself. But it's when you make a mistake and you go back and evaluate it and you're like, what did I do well? What didn't I do well? What would I do differently? That you learn and you grow. If you never fail, then you'll never get that gold. Like success is the worst thing that could happen to anybody. Failure is where you learn.
100% agree. To wrap this up, because I know we're getting close on time, I do have a couple fun questions I want to go through. Okay. And one kind of last series to go on. But I was going through and I was thinking about doing something a little bit different with you. And so part of this was like, ooh, do I want to put her on a desert island? I want to hear more about her coaching mindset. But I was trying to find questions that maybe you haven't been asked before. And so I hope that I accomplish that with this. Are you ready? Mm-hmm. Who is the greatest coach that you have ever had in your life?
Ooh, probably my mother-in-law.
Yeah?
Yeah, I think she's just like, she doesn't realize she's a coach. She's just one of those people who shows up in perpetual creative response to everything.
I love that.
And it makes her such a wonderful human. Like people just gravitate to her. There's nobody like her. We call her Bones, by the way.
Bones?
Yeah. Her name's
Star Trek Bones?
Like, she was skinny when she was a kid. She has two nicknames, Bones and Snitch. She used to like tell on her brothers. So she was Snitch. So like, or Birdie, actually. She has three nicknames, Birdie, Bones, or Snitch. But her name is Arlene. And so we all call her Bones.
Okay.
And she's just a love. And like, she doesn't know that she's a coach, but she is. That's what coaching is. It's just showing up in perpetual creative response, meeting everyone where they're at, having just unconditional positive regard for every human you meet. And she has done that, even though nobody has taught her how to do that. That's what she does.
Oh my gosh. That's so special.
She's the best grandmother.
Okay. My next one for you is, if you were on a desert island and you could bring 3 specialties with you, a member of 3 specialties with you, which specialties would you bring along with you on this desert island?
Like medical or surgical?
Yeah.
Ugh. That's a hard question because probably pediatrics because they're fun.
Wow. I was not expecting that one. That's great.
Yeah. Anything that doesn't have a big ego. I wouldn't have any room. No cardiothoracic surgeons allowed. But okay, one neurosurgeon, it would be specific. It would be Dr. Hefflinger. I would bring him.
There we go. For sure.
Yeah, pediatrics and something like on the spectrum and like super nerdy, like maybe radiation oncology. Like they're super intelligent, right? Because maybe they can figure out a way to get us off.
Wow, that is. I would pay to go to that island. That would actually be a pretty fun island. That might be less of a torture and more of a retreat. Okay. So you mentioned this about your next TED Talk that you've been planning. For everybody listening, Mel has a wonderful TED Talk out there that is on the power of listening, that is on her life story too. Please go check it out. It is incredible. My other question was going to be, if you could give a TED Talk on any other topic, what would it be? But it sounds like we've already got something in the works.
Well, I actually already gave one. I gave it in February, but it hasn't come out yet.
Oh.
So yeah, it's called seeing beyond, what is it called? Beyond the Red Swans is what it's called. And it's all about swan theory. It comes from Chris Voss, the author of Never Split the Difference. He talks about black swans. That's the name of his company, is Black Swan. And so it's taking these techniques that the FBI has employed, and it has revolutionized how the FBI has been able to like negotiate with terrorists and things like that, and kidnappers. And it has revolutionized finance and business and human resources, but it's never come to medicine. And so I apply it to medicine in a very specific way. But instead of there being black swans and white swans, I add a third swan, the red swan. And so that is what the name of my talk is. But it was selected by Big TED as an editor's pick, which means like 0.2% of TEDx talks get selected. So it's like out in like limbo land until it comes out. I don't know when it's going to come out. I gave it in February. It may be published in October. Hopefully by October, November. Yeah, it's not out there yet, but once it goes out there, they will promote it. And so it will be like visible, and it will have like, you get at least 20,000 views, but usually more. So I will have like a promotion machine behind it. Yeah. So when that comes out, I'll let you know.
Yeah. Okay. We're going to keep our eyes peeled for that. I'm so excited. Your first one was incredible. I'm sure this one's going to be just
this one. I think is better.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Awesome. And my last question to wrap this all up. You yourself give so much wonderful advice and change the lives of so many. I'm curious, what would you say is one of the best pieces of advice you yourself have ever been given?
Learn how to let your ego die. You need to suffer an ego death. Yeah. Like every day is I'm figuring out how to kill my ego or let my ego dissolve. And it's actually kind of cute because when my ego has a voice, I'm like, you're so funny. You know, I even like think in my head, I'm like, well, my ego cares about this, but like, what do I like? Separating yourself from your ego and letting your ego die is probably the best piece of advice.
Oh, I love that. You can just put the little ego monster in the corner. It's like crawling out and be like, no.
Yeah. No, it's like, hey, it's like, listen to me. Like, I'm important. And you're like, no.
You so little. You so little. Oh, well, that's fantastic. Well, this has been awesome. I feel like we could talk for 3-4 more hours, but I want to be respectful of your time. This has been incredible. Thank you so much for coming on, sharing your life story, your coaching journey, your own specific pitfalls that you've had and the ways that you've been helping people. It's been such a pleasure to have you on.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was fun.
For everybody listening, you can find episodes like this at thehippocraticcollective.com. That is thehippocratic-collective.com. Until next time, stay healthy, stay human. We'll see you.